Welcome everyone, this is the Kobold Helper, another round of D&D 5th edition house rules that make sense. We're going to start off by rounding out our survey of types of weapons to give each one a more engaging attribute to make it a unique experience, something that is specifically impactful to concrete rules and would give a player a tactical reason of why they might choose to use one kind of weapon over another. Piercing is what we need to talk about to round things out. So with piercing, what do we have? We have a sharp point that's designed to penetrate into the target. So it's going to penetrate in, and in the case of a serious wound, it's going to puncture deep into the target is the word I would use. So we got everything from your arrow to your war pick to your humble dagger. They're not going to make a wide slashing cut. They're not going to make a huge gouge. They're going to pierce, and if you do a lot of damage, it's going to pierce deep. So what can we do to capture that effect in a rule? First off, I think it happens in a very similar fashion to bludgeoning. It's a matter of how much damage do you do. If you're going to not only just pierce the target, but you're going to pierce deep, you're going to puncture the target, as I would say, you need to do a minimum amount of damage. So I'm going to go ahead and use the exact same rule as I have been using for bludgeoning. 7 or more damage from a piercing effect causes a puncture. So just to recap, why 7? Because you have your weaker D4 piercing weapons such as your dagger, and I think it would be less likely that they would do a grievous puncture. They're obviously all going to pierce, but the question is are they going to get in there deep to do some sort of internal damage? On a humanoid, that's going to be some sort of organ damage and internal bleeding. But even on something like a construct, it's like disabling or breaking internal components and causing gears to not go correctly, to start grinding and causing all sorts of havoc inside the construct, etc., etc. But the point is, 7 or more, and you get the puncturing effect, and then it nicely scales. So with that humble dagger, it's still possible if you're quite skilled with the dagger to get a deep puncture. But then if you're using more potent weapons, it just naturally scales, and it's more likely to cause the puncture. All the way up to, say, your lance, which is much more likely to puncture than, say, your dagger. Okay, so what happens by my house rule? At the start of the turn of a target that's been punctured, they take 1 hit point of damage. So you can start to see how the dynamic you get going here is you're puncturing, and then you multiple punctures, puncture. That's when things start to get really dreadful for the target. It's this idea of getting hit with one arrow is maybe not so bad, but you're hitting with 1, 2, 3, 4 arrows that go deep. You are in trouble. And so this is the sort of dynamic, the tactical kind of dynamic that I'm trying to capture with this house rule. But, so what can you do about this being punctured on the other side? So any creature, including the target, can take an action to staunch the wound with a successful DC 12 Wisdom Medicine check. The wound also closes if the target receives any magical healing. So it's a bit of a game, a tactical game of if you're punctured multiple times, you call out for the medic, so to say, and you need to get some aid because you've got all this internal damage that's starting to build up. Lots of internal bleeding, for example, from your typical humanoid. Okay, so that's it. That's I think it's an effect that is on point, pun intended, of what would happen if you have a weapon that's designed to penetrate deep into you, and it does in fact go in for a grievous wound. You'd have an ongoing, lingering bleed effect, if you want to call it that, but of course it wouldn't necessarily be that for all monsters. Okay, that is giving piercing weapons a little bit of extra flavor. So that's our first one. So to add on to our piercing effect, something that just came to mind I forgot to mention. I would say it's sensible that the piercing effect would not work for any creature that's amorphous, like your oozes, or undead. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me that internal damage to those sorts of creatures would have any particular significance. So I would definitely have that as part of the house rule. But let's get on to our next one. And our next house rule that I think makes perfect sense is skill challenges. You've probably heard of this, and so I'll just put my spin on it. So what are we talking about? When having to accomplish something that's more significant than just one simple task, which usually requires an ability check. So, for example, imagine the scene that the castle is beginning to collapse, and we have got to get out of there. We've got to race through multiple rooms and up a set of stairs and out the gate before we are crushed. So this sort of grand attempt at pulling off some sort of stunt that's more than just one action. So a skill challenge is what I do is ask each player to contribute to the overall group, and each player has to try to come up with what ability that they're proficient with could apply to helping out. I totally leave it up to them. What's your idea? And then when they come up with an idea, for example, I'm going to use my my acrobatics to dodge and weave and tuck and roll to go around collapsing columns, something like that. Okay, then I adjudicate. Then okay, you can make your acrobatics check with a DC 15. Just always use a DC 15 for me, because this is typically used for sort of an important difficult situation, not just your everyday ability check. But it's a race to 3 successes versus 3 failures, and it's a round robin of each player in turn coming up with a new idea of how they're going to contribute to whatever you're trying to do using some ability that they're proficient with. So it's a really nice house rule. Causes your players to be creative and think about what can I do to help the team, and also let what they're good at shine in some way that maybe the DM might not even think about. And 2, it makes a moment in the game which is significant, like we're racing to get out of this collapsing castle, more significant than just one single roll, or whatever that case might be, or just one mechanic of how far can we dash. So skill challenges, but specifically each player in turn contributing with their idea, and then the basis of their idea is the skill that the DM adjudicates to that has to contribute to 3 successes before 3 failures. You can really get some interesting ones that you as the DM would never have thought of to ask for. So I really think it's a good one for you to consider trying when you have that pivotal moment. So that's my next house rule that I think makes sense. Skill challenges. Okay, that'll wrap it up for this time. Bye.